So I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order today, being the 1st of December. Things go quickly as the year goes on, and it's 1 o'clock or 5 after, so we're go ahead and start the meeting as posted for 1. And I just want to start, as always, by reminding everybody that this meeting is being held via Zoom. Members of the public have access to the meeting via Zoom, but it's important that everybody recognize that this meeting is being recorded for both audio and visual, so that people recognize that there is a recording being made of this meeting. So I'm going to check with the members to make sure the committee members who are present can hear and be heard, and we complete that process and then quickly review the agenda and move to public comment. So Anna Devlin Gauthier is here.
Present.
And Lynn.
Present.
Bob Hegner.
Present.
Matt Holloway.
Present.
Bernie Kubiak.
Present.
Kathy Shane.
Here.
And I'm here. So everybody's present at the moment except one, and we are expecting that she will, that Alicia will join us. The agenda was posted. We did identical agendas for both meetings when we posted for 2 meetings this week, because we didn't know what we would be able to get through in our first meeting, and wanted therefore to have the option to talk about any of the pending items that are before the Finance Committee. And the one that we spent the entire meeting on Tuesday was the Jones Library Project Supplemental Bond Authorization, which concluded with 2 motions that were passed by the committee. And so therefore, I think the only thing that's left, and I don't want to discuss it now because I'd rather get on to other items on the agenda, and that is whether any members of the committee who have seen the draft of the committee report have any objection to my making it a final and submitting it to Athena for posting. So if there's no request for changes to the draft report, then I'm going to make the report final, and we have nothing else to talk about regarding the library. So I'm looking for hands from the committee. Kathy.
Hi, Andy. I didn't have a chance to read it thoroughly, but there's a point at which you say that much of the discussion focused on the interest costs. I want to change that to the size of the ban, the short-term bonds required, and the interest costs associated with them, because I don't believe we all understand that with the 15.8 million, that's the town obligation, the interest rates have gone up. We didn't really focus on the interest costs for that per se. So when I even when I was looking at it, so it's a change. A lot of the discussion, the proposal to increase was a concern about the interest that would be greater. I just want the focus was on the short-term bonds required to close the gap and the interest costs on that. I just want to insert that sentence. Otherwise, I thought it was clear. I do think it might be helpful, what you put in as detail was the 15.8, the Community Preservation Act, and the overall debt. You didn't put it in that very nice table that we were given that showed the 3 bands, and I would just request that that get attached to this so that people can see what we're talking about. So the most recent estimate was about $750,000 under that column. That otherwise, I think it's reflects our discussion.
The
I mean, I did bring
it
up.
is in there by the attachments, so just.
Okay, I'm just saying that in the actual text, it says we focus on interest, you know.
I got that. I just.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so if it is in the larger, that's fine, so people can see what we're talking about. You know, I did talk about the interaction with our 5-year capital plan, and I don't think it's crucial that be in here unless others think that we should, because that's where my concern is. We've got a tough year. We already were in a tight year for 2026, 2027, and this with the combined interest, the carrying costs. And it's not so much the 15.8 million. If I separate it out, that actually amazingly is only a small increase. Okay.
So here's my suggestion. If there's no objection from other members of the committee, since we don't usually vote on the report, but I try and so that everybody who's watching knows, the committee chairs are encouraged, and I absolutely believe that encouraged for the right reason, to consult with committee members about committee reports. If there's no objection, I will work with Kathy after the meeting by phone, and we will just insert a part of a sentence or a sentence with the point that she raised about pointing out the bands in addition to as a part of interest cost concern. If there's no objection, then we can go forward, and the agenda, which will allow us to spend most of today talking about rental registration, and to the extent we have time, we can talk about budget guidelines. I do want to again ask that somebody try and get a hold of Rob Moore and see if he's going to be able to join us for that discussion. But having said that, if there's no objection from the committee, I would like to ask for public comment, and just let everybody from who's participating in the public know that if they raise their hands, we will recognize them, and we ask you to try and stay about 2 minutes, but to discuss anything that you feel is related to a matter that has or might come before the Finance Committee. It's not restricted to items on the agenda specifically for today. It's any matter relevant. So if there's any requests for public comment, and seeing no requests for public comment, no one has raised their hand. So I think that we can move on. And since we really have made a recommendation about the Jones Library, that there be a discussion with the town manager and about the MOU, trying to clarify the MOU and bring it up to date, was one motion, which was a request of the committee, and then a recommendation of the council that it approved the revision to the bond authorization as requested by the town manager. So those were the 2 motions that were passed at our last meeting. Is there anything else that we need to do, or we can go on to rental registration? And I guess since Rob isn't, unless Paul, do you have anything that you want to say about the MOU, or is there nothing to report?
Not particularly, and I think we're trying to get Rob. I think it's trying to track Rob down. I don't think he received an invitation to attend today, unfortunately. So,
Okay. Well, I'd like to go on and we have the chair of CRC present. We have previously received, and I put in the packet again for today, copies of the relevant material that was provided to us by CRC, which was the proposed regulation, the proposed bylaw, and a spreadsheet which we had available in Excel, as well as the printout of the recommended fee structure that came from the CRC. So there's two people I want to recognize fairly quickly. One is Mandy, whether she has any introductory comments that she'd like to make at this point. And then I know that Kathy had asked for recognition early on because she has been giving some thought to an alternative approach. And so Kathy, I assume that you still want to be recognized at the top. So Mandy, do you have anything introductory, or should I go ahead and recognize Kathy?
I do not. I'm just here to answer the committee's questions if they have any.
Okay, thank you. And I guess that if she doesn't have it and wants it, I would want Kathy to have the ability to share screen. So Kathy, I'm going to recognize you.
Okay, so I'm about to share you the screen. I gave 3 documents on the 17th of November. One was a memo. One was the spreadsheet showing some changes after the fact. And the third was a minor set of markups of the actual regulatory language. So just in terms of background, what I've been looking at from the beginning is, can we reduce the number of inspections so that they're more focused on the problem areas, and therefore reduce the number of inspectors, and reduce the cost for smaller property owners that are not a source of problems. So what I'll do is, maybe I'll just do the memo, Andy, and I made some changes this morning based on some comments that Mandy gave when we talked about it in terms of why certain structures were in the fee schedule. So what I was looking at is, if we reduce the rental permit fee for owning relatively few dwellings, and then for the overall fee, and increase the number of units for which a fee was. The original proposal was to cap the number of units for rental registration at 9. So I looked at, what if we capped it at 15? So we were still capturing more fees. That's what I did on the rental fee side. And I went to a few other cities, so as I know CRC already knows, everybody does it differently, but many of them had more rental registration fees for the larger units. So they went to as high as $2,000 for the really big ones. So I just went to 15 units where you would pay fee. And then go up on the inspection fee, but I actually looked, could we avoid doing that as well? And that's what I'm going to show you is for the basic inspection. I'm looking at the combination. If you're a problem-free property, you'd pay rental registration, and that's an annual, and you might only have to pay the inspection fee once every 5 years. So I'm looking at that impact. And then increase the fee for repeat inspections. I didn't have any way to do it in the spreadsheet because we don't have an estimate of how many repeats. And then the other concept that I don't have any way of doing it is for those who really have been a problem. Think of the inspection. The inspection to me is more intense because it's checking unless it's just zoning. And then in the actual frequency, the regulation had that at the point you hit 25 or more units, you started doing a sample with a sampling of at least 20% or starting with at least 25. And Mandy very clearly defined where there was that minimum. So you didn't have a drop off if you had 26, suddenly you were paying for fewer. I'm not sure why we couldn't reduce the threshold when I looked at the distribution to 10 or more and say that we don't have that 10 under 10, every unit would be inspected. At 10 or more, we'd be doing a sample of at least 10%. And again, the goal is reduce the inspections, but leave the inspector the option, depending on what they found, of doing more. And this would reduce, originally in the memo I gave everyone on the 17th, I said, why 25? Why not 20 or why not 10? When I took another look at it, if we did 10, we're pretty dramatically decreasing the number of inspections we have to do in year one, but we could be giving this jurisdiction to go to more. And then if we do what Mandy had said, is you have to set a minimum of, if it's 10 or more, you have to say at least 10. So the person with 11 units doesn't get a break. So they'd still be at 10. So then the other thing I brought up more than once, that I think allowing the authority to inspect units that are already undergoing federal inspections, I don't think we need to do that. And I understand the reason, and this has been explained both by Rob Moore and then by Mandy, is we're inspecting for more than just the federal inspections where they're particularly focused on health and safety, living conditions. We're also looking at our zoning bylaws, which might include crowding, how many people are living in it. But for the places we have that have a large number of these units, I don't think that they've been a major source of concern with either deteriorating properties or noise, trash, neighborhood issues. They tend to be larger and more self-contained. So I'm looking for focusing the inspections on areas that we can uncover problems and then go back and redo it. So what I did then was run through numbers. So I was always trying to make the fees cover the costs, so that the fees would come as near to covering the costs. So I did just what ifs in the spreadsheet, that if we did 10% fewer inspections or 20% fewer inspections, what does that do with the inspection costs annually? And then with the permit fees, those are easy because you just multiply them. So you could balance, if you reduced the number of inspection by 10 or 20%, you could be collecting enough inspection fees to cover the cost of inspectors. And I think we might need fewer. So it interacts with the wording in the bylaw, because the bylaw has this threshold of 25 when you start sampling. And I think we could start sampling at a lower threshold. So those were the areas. So a smaller random sample, 10% rather than 20, rate lowering the threshold, and then thinking about the two fees, the inspection fee and the registration fee, trying to keep them more affordable for the properties that are not concern. And Andy, if I stop sharing this one, I can just quickly show, I think, but the spreadsheet is the hardest to look at in a quick way. So what I did, and people can do this later, and I know Mandy and CRC can do it, is like I did what ifs. What if the inspection fee going up? Let me go up. What if the base fee for the owner occupied was 100 and for all others was 150 rather than 250? This is a decrease. And then the additional registration fees go up to 15. So looking at the amount of fees we collect over here, total fees collected, that more than covers the cost of registration based on what Rob gave us, with a little bit of the, and then I looked at what happens if the inspection fee, the one I think I gave in November 17th had 250 here, but then I went back to the original 150, but said, what if we did fewer inspections, that the inspection cost at 80% or at 90%, what would it be? And then what the total cost is and the total fees. So I was trying to do that interaction. So the concept is basically lower the fees for that are the general fees, apply it for the units on registration, more units. So we collect a bigger registration fee for the really big properties and focus the inspections on the problem areas. And as I said, so I left the 250 for a repeat inspected. So those are the trade-offs I was trying to do to get to a focus both of the inspection activity and the repeat inspection activity to be at areas of concern. So that's a lot to adjust to, but the concept is lower fees applied to more units, inspection fees with fewer units, every unit inspected with more of a random sample starting at 10. You know, I looked at a threshold of 20 rather than 25, and you very nicely gave me a way to look at cutoffs. We don't have that many properties in the 20-25 range. So they would still be randomly inspected, all of them. And I will stop talking. So finance was asked to look at the fee schedules, and that's what I focused on. And the only part of the bylaws wording I did was where it triggered how many inspections we were going to do. Because the number of inspections drives the costs. And I went through a lot very quickly. I tried to do a simplified cover memo, concept cover memo. And I will stop sharing the screen. The November 17th one marked up the bylaw, but Mandy pointed out to me why they'd put that minimum of 25 if the threshold was 25 rather than just a sample. So I think that rationale made sense. So whatever the threshold is, that becomes the minimum going outward. If it was 20, it would be at least 20. Right now, the bylaw says 25, at least 25 for all the larger units. So I'm willing to stop sharing this so I can see all the faces and I can go back over any part of this. And I know Bob Hegner, because he sent me one, he was playing with fees as well, you know, looking at higher, lower fees, who it would hit. And then I looked at Burlington and Boston, which do it in completely different ways. Boston has very low registration fees and higher inspection fees. Burlington seems to load everything on the registration fee. So, you know, in terms of any kind of examples, so I was trying to do a minimum while enabling us to get into properties. And again, the larger properties, if you suspect a problem, you're probably going to see it in the basic building as well as each unit. So the sampling will be, the initial inspection is going to say, what's the boiler system look like? What does the electrical system look like? That's it. Trying to make this less bureaucratic, less onerous, and targeted to get at what we're concerned about.
So maybe I should ask Mandy if you have any thoughts about it, either on behalf of CRC or just from your extensive work with this.
So I think the changes to how many inspections that Kathy just talked about is a potential discussion for the whole council, but I would not say it's necessarily a discussion for this committee. Because I understand, Kathy, that you're going to argue that discussion needs to happen because then you have to you need to know that to set the fees. But the committee, I believe, should be discussing the fees and making a recommendation based on the bylaw that CRC has voted. And the council, if the council deems it necessary to vote an amendment to a bylaw, the council can either choose to adopt the fees as recommended, however that is, or send it back for modification based on the bylaw that is adopted, if it is adopted, or it could adopt fees and then immediately request that the Board of License Commissioner re-look at the fees in light of the changes made potentially by the council to the bylaws, because once the council adopts a set of fees under the bylaw, if the bylaw is adopted, the Board of License Commissioners goes there. CRC discussed a lot of things about fees, many of which Kathy's bringing up, right? I think the discussion is, does this committee want an permit fee that want to make a recommendation of a permit fee and inspection fee combo that relies on more steadier permit fees coming in that will that would cover both the cost of administration of the program and in terms of all of the permitting of the program, that administration, as well as a portion of the costs of the inspection part of the program, and then use the inspection fees to supplement that and cover the remaining costs by recognizing that the permit fee is covering a portion of those inspection fees. Or does the committee want a recommendation that says the permit fees will cover mostly only the permit portion and the inspection fees need to go sky high to cover the inspection portion, and depending on how that is rewritten means you have to look at it differently. You can do a lot, right? As anyone who's looked at the Excel spreadsheet, you can play with the numbers unlimited. But I think the committee just needs to discuss what way it wants to go in that. You know, and it would be perfectly reasonable, I would say, for the committee to discuss whether it wants a cap at 10 units or a higher number. And I don't think that matters with whether the bylaw is adopted as is or with modifications. That's something I think the committee can discuss and make a recommendation on. CRC made one at 10. It's what the building commissioner had recommended, and we went with that. But that's certainly up for debate on whether the committee thinks it's necessary. I guess at this point, that's all I have.
Yeah, I don't know if Rob will join us. If he doesn't, is there anything about why he was recommending 10 that you can recall to share?
I think it was because at that number, the set of buildings, if you look at our split of parcels and rental units on parcels, starting at 10, first of all, it's a number that is easily determined from a reporting view. Every time CRC's gotten a reporting, it's been singular up to 10, and then 11 to 20, or actually I think it's 10 to 19, 20 to 29. And so I think that's partially why, because that's how the system reports and all. And so it's easier to gauge up to 10 versus say up to 15. But the other reason was when you look at that spreadsheet and the reporting of it, there is a significant drop off starting at buildings or parcels with 10 or more units. There's a significant drop off as how many there are, because the bulk of our parcels have less than 10 units on them from a parcel basis. And so I think that was the other reason he said 10, that he recommended 10.
Kathy?
You know, the sheet that I did, when we made the change, what, a year or so ago, Mandy, on the fees, we went up to 250, and then we gave a break to owner occupied. We've been, as you just pointed out, we've been generating more than the cost of running the permitting, but that's helped subsidize, that's helped cover the cost of inspections. So if we now are charging for inspections, one of the logic is to go easier on the registration fees, because everyone has to do that. It's my thinking is people are running perfectly decent rental units. When we inspect them, it turns out they're great. You know, they've got long-term residents in it. They're not a problem in the community on any level. They are not violating other pieces. So we should minimize the system costs for that group. So that would be my argument on, you can go lower on that. And I didn't have to go sky high on the inspection fee if I reduce the number of inspections, you know, so that and as you said, that's in the bylaw draft right now, is start at 25 and do a minimum of 25, and everything up to 25, you do every unit. I don't see a strong rationale for that. And when we sent this to finance, I made sure we at least had an open door to look at the wording where it had to do with anything with frequency, where frequency was going to affect the financing. So if I don't go over to that threshold, the inspection fees do have to be much higher, as you just said. You know, we won't collect enough money to run the program. So that's why they're interactive. And I'm fine with saying I have to do this again at the council level. But I thought finance should be at least recognizing that the cost of the inspection side of the program is driven by how many units we're going to inspect. And if we don't say that, then we can't estimate it. And that's being driven by the wording in the bylaw. It's not left to the discretion of anybody the way it's written right now, unless we change that wording. So I did think that I did look at the thresholds. There aren't that many between 10 and 25. You know, the really big units start at 100, and random. And I think 10% is a decent sampling amount if you're looking for health, safety, faulty systems. And then you can use your inspect and enforce. And I will say, and I see Bernie's hand is up. I want to say this as non-negatively as I can, but my recent experience on the health inspector side has indicated that we can have a tendency to go too far, you know, to be too narrow in what we're looking for. And I want our inspectors to be, which I think the building inspectors for the most part have been, is really looking for what we think are problem rentals, defined in any way you want to do it. Not looking for, ooh, this isn't quite right in some way. So I don't want it to be harassment in any way, which is what some recent businesses, and I got up to 12 or 15, so I wasn't just one or two. So I want to make sure we focus on what we think are the problems. So Bernie, I'll go back to you, but that's why I had to look at the bylaw wording, because it drove your inspection estimates. Otherwise, as you said, you had to go up much higher on the inspection fee to cover the cost of inspections because of the number that were specified in the bylaw, that we had to hit every single unit up to 25. And that was when we started doing sampling. That's a response to the interaction on the inspection line, not on the registration line.
Andy, real quickly, I'm just noting that Anna left the meeting at about 1:35.
So I see Bernie's hand is up. So this is
Yeah,
clearly the mixes and matches are infinite here, but I was really looking at reducing the cost of the total program and focusing it. And that the focus is on the inspection is the focus. Everyone has to register.
Bernie? We can't hear you, you're muted.
Click that off. Yep. Let me just start off by saying the quality of the inspection, whether the inspector is being harassing or too precise, less than forgiving. I mean, I've been subject to 2 inspections in this town. I've also had people complain to me about inspections in other towns that I've managed. That's a supervisory issue. It has nothing to do with the fees.
Exactly.
People have a complaint about the quality of the inspection, and they go to that department head and they interact with the department head and have the department head fix it. So if you've got 12 restaurateurs who are complaining about the quality of their inspections, that doesn't count in terms of talking about rental inspections. Okay. As a former administrator, my preference would be to have as much of the cost covered up front as possible. Because the number of there'll be, we got a mix here of registration fees and a known number of inspections. That combination should be sufficient to cover the cost of the program, including benefits for the employees. My concern here is we're raising headcount, and that's going to be an ongoing cost. And if the program is, it's like the cops. If the cops are remarkably successful, nobody gets a ticket. Nobody gets arrested. If this program is remarkably successful, we won't have any re-inspections. And our income will go down as a result, which is why you don't use the police department as a revenue source. So I'm agnostic as to which scheme here we endorse. But the bottom line is we should have a known number of registrations, a known number of inspections, and between the two, all the costs should be covered. Now, I'm not saying, Kathy, I didn't have, until you put it up on the screen, I didn't have access to your spreadsheet. And again, I'm agnostic as to whose spreadsheet we use. I just want to make sure that we're covering the costs.
Bernie, I submitted it on the 17th too, and I totally agree with what you just said. And I think it's a principle for whatever we say, Andy, that I was looking for any kinds of changes. The sum of the fees from the 2 sources, the inspection fee and the rental fee, the inspection fee and the registration fee covered the projected costs. The costs are a function of how many inspections we think we're going to do a year. So that's where I went to the threshold for inspections. But I totally agree with you that we need to start it out so it's self-financing. And in a steady state, if the miracle occurs that we've identified the problem houses, they've cleaned up their act, and everyone is on a 5-year plan, that would be a success. And at some point, we would have inspectors doing something else. But in any case, that would be not a bad outcome of a program if we got to that point. Or if they now had a list of, these are the ones we're really going to focus on, that would also be a very good outcome. That most people are on 5-year plans.
Yes, I agree that the combination of registration fees and inspection fees should cover the cost of the program. I think the spreadsheets, however they've done that, we've done that in the spreadsheets. I also want to emphasize again my support for keeping the costs as low as possible, the total cost as low as possible for those landlords who have fewer units. It's just in my experience in hurricane recovery is that what we call a small rental program was different than a large rental program because the needs of small landlords that have small numbers of units are different than landlords that operate large buildings. So I do think that the latest version of this gets us closer to what I would see is the ideal. But I just would emphasize the importance of trying to keep the cost as low as possible for those people who only have a few units.
Yeah. Thank you. I was just curious why Amherst Media is actually now in the panelist group.
They've been covering the finance committee meetings. Sometimes they don't join in time to be here from the beginning, but and I'll just send them the recording, but they're covering now. As
Yeah,
usual.
usually I see them in the attendee side. So going back to where we were, I guess that I want to make sure that I understand and get a consensus, get a sense of the committee members present about the concept of making sure that the fees covering the cost of the program. The one thing that we had discussed was, or we talked about two things. One is that we did not think that it was advisable that we use any money from the general fund budget tax portion and other, the just general fund budget in particular, but that we were open to the money from the university that was part of the strategic partnership agreement that was given to us to address the housing problems that are caused by the number of university students in the community. So that was $100,000. So when you're saying this, are we assuming the $100,000 can be used for this program, or are you trying to get the fees to cover the entire thing and not use the 100,000? Just want to make sure that we're clear on this.
CRC's goal was to generate revenues in between needing to use all of the 100,000 and needing to use 0 of the 100,000, because it right now is really just a true an educated estimate that is done based on as much information as we have, right? But until we get through a year or two, it is just that, an estimate that is that way. And so we have been, CRC was told that it could assume the use of that 100,000 for this program, but we were hesitant to assume the full use and get and make an estimated and a fee-based recommendation using all of it, just in case our estimates and calculations were slightly off. And so the goal was to find a number that was comfortably within that margin, I would say. It was how I would put it.
But the way I read the spreadsheet, if I read it correctly, that was submitted, it was assuming more of it would be used, or a good part of it would be used. But unless the revised spreadsheet came out differently.
Yeah, Andy, when I did it, I didn't try to use the 100,000. I tried to get them really close, which is when I went to the threshold of 10 for inspections. And, on what Bob said of trying to minimize for if you say those with not very many properties, if you did under 6 or 6 or less, the original one we had was, if you weren't owner occupied, it was 250 plus another 50 for each of the other 5. So it was 550 to register, and that would be every year. And then the first year inspection was 150 and another 150 for each of the units. So another 50, it's 2,000. So trying to go lower on the registration fee. So since it, and have the inspection cover more, but have the inspection number of inspections we're doing not be as high, allowed you to go lower on the inspection fee, while still covering costs. So it is definitely interactive with how often we're inspecting. And I have no problem with inspecting every unit for the smaller ones, and if what's smaller, under 10, in the first year. And then those, well, I'm hoping a huge number of them get the 5-year dispensation, that they're fine. The owner occupied ones and not. Some places completely exempt owner occupied altogether from inspection, and we exempt them from the unit fee. So I think that's why I got to the more complicated of, when do we start? At what point are we inspecting every unit, and when do we start sampling? And that's in the bylaw. That's not, we wrote that into the bylaw. We didn't leave that for later determination. I mean, that's the bylaw we're looking at in terms of regulations. So it was trying to reduce for the problem free. So Bernie, I know at one point you said if someone owns 2 or 3 properties, they're not necessarily low income, but if they own 2 or 3 properties and they're keeping them up, they've got great tenants, we're not trying to burden them either. That's an okay small business to be in. Having a few properties you're operating for rental. We would like to go after the people that the owners that don't pay any attention to the condition of their property in terms of what it does to the tenants, and they don't pay any attention to what it does to the neighborhood in terms of they're only supposed to be 4 and there are 8 people living there with 8 cars and with trash. So that's what I think that was why we started on this whole trying to figure out which those are. And being able to go get inside the house to see what else is going, the home, to see what else is going on.
Lynn?
Yeah, I want to go back to just, again, having not frankly had time to look at this. Are we charging appropriately for the service we're providing versus are we not doing that? And this is an issue that's been brought up by some of the owners of these properties. In other words, we're charging for a service we're providing, and it's not a tax. It's a question.
And
Bernie,
I see Bernie's hand is up. The answer right now would be our rental permit collection fee collects more than just the rental permit registration, but it's including the inspection. So it could be, if you say that's the package deal, we are inspecting houses, we're just not inspecting them until there's a complaint. So Bernie, but I think aligning those fees with costs is really important.
Bernie?
You can't parse out the staff that you have a department, and you have to pay for the department. You have to pay for those people who are involved in the program, whether the program means an initial license or an inspection or a follow-up or whatever. So again, you got to make sure that you're covering the costs. And coming down to whether we use the $100,000 from UMass or not, I mean, I can see using that money in the initial year to help get things started, because we're not going to get 100% of our money collected. We're going to end up doing more inspections than we probably planned on for a variety. That's because life works that way. But in my my simple world of municipal finance, there's hard money and there's soft money. Hard money is what you know you can raise. Soft money is what comes in on a variable basis or can go away, and that's the UMass money. So if we're going to have a program, it should be self-sustaining. And if UMass gives us money, then that gives us the opportunity to enhance the program in some way without raising the fees, or it gives us the opportunity to cover for those unanticipated expenses or for emergencies. So whatever fee structure we use needs to cover the costs.
Lynn?
And I think Lynn's point is, and not generate a surplus. It needs to be, if otherwise it looks like a tax. We need,
Well, none of that's not exactly any program that the town operates has got to cover its costs. And if we have an excessive amount of money over that we earn over covering our costs, that's an issue. And that's regardless of what we do.
the challenge.
I mean, what you can, and the DOR will allow you to add on some costs to cover things like capital improvements, equipment repair, unforeseen circumstances. So if your fees are covering 105, 110% of your costs, the Commonwealth is not going to be concerned. The Commonwealth being DOR. If you're now all of a sudden coming in on 120, 125% over, you're going to hear from the state and they're going to tell you to back off. So, nobody, I've been part of the nonprofit world for a long time. And, for-profit corporations get to make a profit. Not-for-profit organizations need to retain revenue. And if you have a system where you are guaranteed that you're going to lose money year to year to year because you haven't covered your costs or you haven't given yourself a little bit of a cushion, you're not doing the taxpayers any service. You're constantly scrambling to make this stuff up. So again, whatever table we use has to cover our costs. And nobody likes to pay taxes. Nobody likes to pay extra for services. It was real nice when you could go to the town clerk's office and, get something notarized for free. Can't do that anymore. But that's the fact of life. You gotta be able to keep that program running. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Mandy, was there an indication from Rob about whether it would take the full 5 years to do the initial inspection on all units, or did he anticipate that he could do that in less time?
He anticipated that with let me look up the number of inspectors. With his estimate of needing, I believe it was 3 inspectors, that they would be able to, as the document is written, as the regulations and bylaw are written, be able to complete all required inspections to issue permits. So all of the permit inspections within 5 years. That is how he made his estimate for doing that. I did want to add, Kathy's been talking about, well, if we reduce the number of inspections needed for the large ones and all, we can reduce the number of inspectors. I would hesitate to assume that is true until talking to Rob, or how much you can reduce until talking to Rob. I can't answer that myself. Rob would have a much better idea of if there's a reduction of X number of inspections required under the bylaw, could the estimated number of inspectors needed be reduced. I cannot answer that. Rob should be able to answer that, based on things. So, but his estimation was 3 inspectors for this program would cover the ability to do all of the required inspections within 5 years. And that, I think his estimate included an estimate of the required inspections and his guess at how many would need follow-up inspections. So not just the raw number of 300 inspections or whatever, but how many would, him guessing with how many are we going to have to go into a second time because there are violations and stuff. I think that was his estimate, that he could fully do the program, the startup program, in 5 years with 3 inspectors.
And I say that in part because I had assumed that if we used the UMass money for startup, and no matter whatever number of years we want to make the assumption for, that helps us get it going, and that once we've gotten the initial inspections done in all units, if the program is successful, the number of inspections required should decrease. And then the number of inspectors required might be adjusted by administrative decisions, but not until we've completed the first round.
Yeah, I think that's his assumption. I can't totally speak for him, but he was looking at the first 5 years, full inspections of every unit at least once. And then I believe he would then reevaluate and look at that. But he was looking at startup 5 years and inspectors needed for that.
Which is why I think that I would put forward that we should consider using the UMass money to help control other